Hi and welcome to another Seeing Double video. I'm Garden Girl Jen Gallagher, and today I wanted to show you some of the hottest trends that I'm seeing in scrapbooking right now. And that is the washed out watercolor look. And here are some pattern papers that use that. This particular pattern paper is a slightly older one from Heidi Swapp, but you can see that even in the diagonal stripes, the color of the diagonals is a little bit washed out. This is actually the background paper that we're going to be using today. This is from an Amy Tangerine pattern paper. And it is actually put pink polka dots on the back, but the mist is already on the paper. So for those of you that are mist challenged, this is a great pattern paper to start with. And I will be sure to link you to this in the supply list below. There are a couple of papers from Glitz Design that have this kind of washed out watercolor. Even sometimes in the actual icons themselves, such as these arrows, things are a little washed out. And this is a great example of kind of that washed out, hand-painted look. And this is from their Dapper Dan collection. And this one is from the collection called Wild and Free. So we're going to go ahead and use some of these pattern papers that have this watercolor washed out look to create a layout. So as I said, we're going to start with this fun pattern paper that already has mist. If you don't have this pattern paper, you could easily add this with some Huey Studio Calico White Mist, or Heidi Swapp has a new white mist that's coming out, or you could use whatever color you want. You can also actually water down some acrylic paint and kind of flick it onto the page with a paintbrush to get this look. So we're going to be bringing in some other watercolor things. This is from the Color Wash collection from Pink Paisley. This is also from the Color Wash collection, and they are printed on vellum, so it gives them that kind of washed out look. Also, embellishments are showing that kind of watered down look. These two tags are from Fancy Pants Designs, and we'll be using some of these elements to create the layout. So I'm going to start with this layout, just kind of basically laying everything out. And this is what I do before I film for you guys, is I typically kind of start putting things on my page to get a feel for where I want the embellishments and everything to lay. Then I come back and I start filming the actual project for you. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to start with this Heidi Swapp pattern paper, and I am using a dot runner. And this will kind of ground the entire layout. And I've pre-cut everything so that we can just move quickly and create the layout. These particular photos are of my daughter. She went to a dance at her school, and I've pre-cut them to fit them in the frames. And to do that, you can either measure the frame and then cut your 4x6 inch photos to fit inside, or if you print at home, which I do, I actually measure the width and the height of the frame and print them out exactly. So go ahead and add this to the second photo. You could also actually use these frames on a full 4x6 photo so that it expands beyond and the frame actually just frames out part of the photo. We'll go ahead and add the photos to the layout. And we're only going to use 2. Typically I will use 3 different pattern papers, but today, or rather photos, but today I'm only using 2, and I'll do that when I have a cluster of items that's a little larger. So I'm going to create that cluster with a doily that I've cut in half, and then I'm going to add these tags from Fancy Pants. You could also cut tags from pattern paper that is already got this washed out colored look if you don't have these tags from Fancy Pants. So look for ways that you can either die cut or hand cut your elements so that they give you that look. So when we're placing the vellum banner, we don't want it to go over her face too much, and I don't need all of the banner obviously. Now do remember that the adhesive will show a little bit, so I only put enough to kind of hold it in place. don't cover the entire vellum piece with adhesive or else it will show and it's very distracting. You could also hand stitch this or machine stitch this down, or you could use brads in this corner and this corner to hold it in place. On the bottom here, I'm going to use some chevron wood grain pattern paper. It's solid wood on the back and a lighter chevron. And this is from the Dapper Dan collection from Glitz. And this is a boy collection, but because wood is kind of a neutral, we're going to go ahead and use this on this girly page. I also like that on this second side that the wood grain is also a little more washed out. Again, I'm trying to use as much washed out elements as I can. Then I'll take that arrow pattern paper from Glitz, and this is from the Wild and Free collection. And we'll trim off a little bit of that. Simply layering different widths of pattern paper. You can see on the back side of this, it has a very watercolored look to it. So depending on how bold you want to go, just select the side of the pattern paper that works for the style of the layout that you're creating. I printed my journaling on some craft pattern paper to kind of bring out the wood grain a little bit more. You could also print or write your journaling on one of the washed out pattern papers. And you could even use watercolor paper and paint directly on watercolor paper and then print. Don't want to cover up all of those pink arrows, so I'm actually going to flip the arrows. I sometimes change my mind about how things lay on the page. All right, to this top edge here, I'm going to add a few embellishments. One being this tag that I cut off from Elle's Studio, and I just cut off the top portion so I could tuck it into my journaling. And I just want part of it to show. And then I took a small little die cut from Basic Gray that says the details, and it matches this green that shows up throughout the collection. And we'll place that on top there. And I always like to add a little bit of washi tape. And this particular dot is from Doodlebug Designs. And then I'm going to use a gray chevron. That is from Doodlebug as well, or rather Pebbles. This one is from Pebbles, I'm sorry. I love the look of just layer tape. Now I wanted to add a little bit of the green that you're kind of seeing around the page, and to do that I took the Glitz Design washed out pattern paper, and I took a pair of old decorative scissors that I have, and then I simply cut out a border from the pattern paper. Now when you have pattern paper that is washed out like this, you want to try and capture some of the gradient or some of the washed out distressed look. So as you're planning where your border is going to take place, or if you're mounting actual photos on this and this serves as your foundation, think about where the gradient of these washed out things are so that you know the best place to put them on your layout. So let's go ahead and adhere this to the bottom here. I'm going to tuck it just below my journaling. That helps bring, again, some of that green back down to the bottom of the page. You can also use border punches. And another technique I've seen used is that you actually punch out individual circle punches and use them as a border. I have the other half of the doily that we're going to add to the bottom of the layout. Lift up that brown just enough. This is a great way to stretch your supplies. There's no need to use an entire doily and waste it there. Before I go any further, I want to add a little bit of stamping, and I almost always use a kind of script and regular block font, a combination font. And then I just stamp directly onto my layout. I want to use a color that will stand out a little bit. Hopefully this tan will be visible. And this just kind of helps support the journaling that I already added to the page. And just firmly press the entire phrase. And that tan looked great. So for the title, I'm going to be using some of these clear acetate letters. And they are somewhat see-through, so you need to plan on your adhesive. I'm just going to use mini glue dots. You could also machine stitch through them. They are thin enough to do so. But you can see that I just add a little bit of a glue dot there. And they are a little bit rounded, meaning the bottom kind of curves up a little bit. So just make sure you place them on your layout so that they lay flat. You could also use a wet adhesive. I think they would work very well with that. I like to do combination titles, meaning I like to use 2 different types of things at least, sometimes 3. I might include like a stamp and a chipboard letter, or I might include a die cut and chipboard stickers, but I do like to do combination titles. And for today's combination title, I'm going to be using these glitter stickers from American Crafts. They are part of their Remarks collection. And I'm going to lightly place them down before I finish adhering them. I have found with my thickers that because I manhandle them quite a bit, they kind of lose their stickiness. So I usually add additional adhesive to the bottom of them so that they will stay. And I just want to make sure that I get my placement kind of where I want them before, again, I place them on the page permanently. And then we'll go back and start adhering them with some of the glue dots. Again, Remarks are just thin enough that if you wanted to, you could easily machine stitch them. I just kind of strategically place the glue dots. Because this is her dance, that's why I chose the kind of blinged alphabet. For something a little more subtle, you could do some washed out letters. You could do the die cut, a silhouette die cut title from some of the papers that I've showed you, or some others that you find in the two-piece store. So I want to add a few embellishments to the page to finish it off. And I have a few things that I found that were particularly fun. There are these arrow paper clips, and these are from Webster's Pages from the Allison Creft. And you can see that they split apart like this. You want to make sure that when you split them apart that the full arrow is on top, because if you don't, you're going to end up with that part of the arrow. So make sure you put them on correctly. And this mimics the arrow that you see down here. I love, I'm not sure how you say this, cochons. Anyway, they're enamel or rather resin flowers that I'm seeing everywhere. These particular ones are from Fancy Pants, but several companies do make them. They're just a fun embellishment, especially for a girly page like this. And I try and do odd number. And then to mix it up, I don't like to use the same embellishment for everything. I'm going to add a coral button tied with twine. So there you have a layout that uses some of these washed out products that you're seeing in the two-piece store. Let's go ahead and make a card using some of these same products. So before we make the card, I want to show you one more way to get that washed out kind of watercolor look on your page. I recently took a class with Heidi Swap, and she showed us how to use the color wash system. And you'll want to get a couple of mists from Heidi Swap as well as some color wash elements. And you'll notice that they have kind of a dull part and a shiny part. And what you do is, with Heidi specifically, you take the mist and you actually do shake it up. Some of the other manufacturers, you do not shake it up. But for Heidi's, you want to shake it up really good. You can hear the ball moving around in there. I'm going to be using coral, and then you want to put some kind of a shield. This is a plastic bag, a paper towel, the elements you're going to have, and then you want to have an extra paper towel handy. And then the way she suggests misting is that you're going to move across the element instead of just going like that onto the element. So let me get a little bit closer so you can see what happens. And she describes this as you wouldn't use hairspray on your hair and just glom it all in one area. Rather, you would kind of spray it all over the hair, which is what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and spray. And she also says you want to push down pretty heavily. Okay, then once you're done misting, you go ahead and put a paper towel on top and tap it down. And then you're going to mush up the paper towel and you're going to buff the project. Now obviously you want it to dry, but this is the finished product. And you can see that certain areas stay white and certain areas stay clean. Now sometimes it dyes the actual area. She suggests spraying it with either Windex and rebuffing it, or the gold lame will surprisingly remove some of that color stain and make that back areas white. Again, this is all from Heidi Swapp. This is not stuff I discovered, but this is a great way to get that watercolor wash. So using this coral butterfly, let's go ahead and make the card. So I have all the elements to make my card. We're going to start with that misted pattern paper, and it does have that charming polka dot on the inside, so you don't have to do anything special to it. Again, I'm going to use another doily. This will go in the center of my card. And then I'm going to be using a different Polaroid. This is not from the Color Wash system. This is a different Heidi Swapp Polaroid frame. And I'm going to attach the back first. And we'll center that right in the middle of our doily. And then on the inside, before I place it down, I have some of that Dapper Dan pattern paper from Glitz. And we're going to, rather than fill the frame with a photo, we're actually going to fill the frame with this pattern paper. And you want to make sure as you close it that all the corners match up. Some of that Heidi Swapp diagonal pattern paper that we used on our layout, and again we're going to cut it into a pennant shape, and then we're going to wrap it with some white twine to give it some texture. You could use baker's twine if you prefer. Just wrap it around several times and then tie it into a bow. And then because of the twine, it doesn't always stick, which is regular adhesive. So I'm going to go ahead and use some glue dots to adhere it. And just a few to help hold it in place. Make sure you don't glue down the twine. And make sure your pennant runs across the center of your page. Then I had that leftover piece of that polka dot vellum. Again, make sure you only add enough adhesive that it stays in place, but not so much that it shows through. We will mount the misted butterfly in the center, and this you can actually peel off the back, and it's a sticker. Some of them in her collection are and are not. I'm going to go ahead and add some additional adhesive because I do have that string running across. We want to center that in the middle of the frame. I took another coral button and tied it with twine again. You could also use those cochons. Again, I'm not exactly sure how they say that. My French is definitely a little rusty. And then for the sentiment for this card, I'm going to be using some Heidi Swapp stickers. And these make great card embellishments or titles for your layout. And they're an epoxy that is on a transparency sheet. And we're going to take the word enjoy off, and be very gentle when you're peeling it away. They are rather fragile. Make sure you can read the sentiment. And then it does have a teeny, teeny, tiny dot for the eye. If you can get it off, great. And if not, like I can't, it's a little too tiny for my fatter fingers. So there you have a card that uses some of the leftover supplies. And again, we focused on using some of the watercolor washed out products that are available at 2Ps. They make great layouts and cards. Thank you for joining me for today's Seeing Double video. Be sure to subscribe to the 2Ps YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of their tutorials.